Hello and welcome to Ag PhD. I'm Brian Hefty.
And I'm Darren Hefty. Thanks for joining us today. One of the jobs in the summer you may not be thinking about on your farm is summer seeding a crop for next year. Now, the crop we're going to talk about today is alfalfa. If you want to get alfalfa established right now, it could be a good time on your farm.
We're also going to talk a little bit about unplanted acres this year and how you can make those acres great going into next year. There are many steps you can take yet this season to get that ground in good shape for 2021.
And one of the things you could do right now on your farm is get our weed of the week under control. We'll show you how to stop this tough weed coming up a little later in the show. But first, here's our farm basics.
Stop losing money from your stored grain with the End Zone Fan Control System from Farm Shop MFG. The End Zone monitors outside conditions to run your fans so your grain naturally reaches ideal temperature and humidity. For more information, visit farmshopmfg.com.
During our farm basics time today, we're going to talk just a little about food versus fuel. Now, this is one of the things that's come out in the last 10 years in the United States. There are a lot of people arguing that ethanol should not be used as fuel because that takes away a lot of corn that would go into the food supply. So we want to talk today about how that is 100% a myth and that American farmers can supply both food and fuel.
Well, I think, first of all, Brian, there's a little bit of a misunderstanding out there with most people in society about what this field of corn is right behind us, because many people look at it and say, wow, that is the sweet corn that I'm going to put the ears of on my table, and I'm going to eat ears of sweet corn right out of that field. This is actually number 2 yellow corn, which has a little different purpose than the sweet corn that you may be used to.
Okay, so most of the corn in the United States actually goes to food for livestock, not food for human beings. It is a very tiny percentage of products that come out of the corn, like let's just say corn syrup, that go into human consumption. So most of it is to feed livestock out there. The other thing that's important to understand here is ethanol plants only take the starch from the corn kernel. That's it. Leaves all the nutrition, all the nutrients, everything else that remains in that corn, and that's what goes to what we call distiller's grain, and that does get fed to livestock. So in other words, if you wanted to replace the starch that's pulled out, literally all a farmer would have to do is take just some of the residue left out in his field in the fall, bale that up, and mix that together with the distiller's grain. Now you're back to 100% just like you were before. And you might say, well, wait a second, farmers want all that residue in their field. No, they don't. Go ask any farmer. They don't want all that residue. A lot of us are raising 250 plus bushel corn now. We've got so much residue, and so much that we even as farmers call it trash. We're trying to get rid of the trash. We're trying to bury the trash or have it broke down somehow, some way. If we just took a little bit of that, combined it with the distiller's grain, again, we'd be back to 100% of where we were before. So you say, well, why don't they just take that starch, all that trash that's out in the field, and use that for ethanol? They're not able to do that economically. It's much cheaper and easier to do the corn kernel and convert that to ethanol, pull the starch out of there, take that to ethanol, and go that way. So anyway, we just wanted to try to debunk this myth of food versus fuel. There is no such thing. Ethanol is a great fuel source, and it can continue to be without affecting the food supply in the United States whatsoever.
Now, one thing that I wish would be a food source would be our weed of the week, because it'd be a nice way to get rid of this thing rather than have it rob yield out in our fields. We'll show you how to stop this tough weed later in the show.
If you want unparalleled performance from your corn head, you need the Diamant from Capello USA. Fully hydraulic deck plates chop with speed and precision, and chain-free gearboxes make a quieter, more efficient machine. The Diamant's revolutionary quick-release snouts and bonnets prevent damage and make maintenance a breeze. And our folding option allows for clear visibility on roads, making travel between fields safe, quick, and easy. For more ways the Diamant can innovate your corn harvest, contact your Capello dealer today. Capello, wherever you are, we are.
Success isn't just about maintaining your operation, how you make out for the season, or how much you can get from each acre. It's about doing precisely what needs to be done to feed your crop and grow your legacy. all the way down to the last drop. AgroLiquid Precision Crop Nutrition. Apply less, expect more. Find a retailer at agroliquid.com.
Pentair Hypro Ultra Low Drift nozzles are your ideal choice for the Enlist E3 herbicide system. With coverage comparable to flat fans and with 90% less drift, ULD nozzles meet all required standards for Enlist applications and provide optimal performance of contact herbicides. Learn more at pentair.com/hypro.
Each year brings new and unique challenges to farming, and your operation needs to constantly adapt to meet them. That's why at AgBiome, we're working every day to bring you new and better solutions. Microbial-based solutions that protect your crop and help it reach its full potential. To learn more about how we're doing it, visit agbiome.com. AgBiome, feeding the world responsibly, partnering with microbes for human benefit.
Engineered to be the most advanced concave system available, the XBR system threshes all crops, reduces grain loss, and significantly improves grain quality and storability.
Probably the biggest difference that we noticed right away was the grain quality. The sample was much better. With this XBR system, now we've cut down rotor loss significantly. I can switch out a 2-pound cover plate in just a few minutes and jumped about 30% more on our capacity.
Visit EstisPerformanceConcaves.com.
When it comes to getting a good stand of alfalfa, growing up, my dad always said there are 2 really good times on our farm for seeding alfalfa, April and August. Well, guess what? You may have gotten some crop in April, and that's great, but if you just took a wheat crop off and alfalfa's in your rotation, this is a great time to get it established. You've got enough time to get a great stand out there, a deep root system, so it can survive that upcoming winter. We're going to talk about getting that crop off to a great start so you have an awesome stand of alfalfa for years to come.
All right, the first thing that we want you to consider is the fertility. Here's the difference between alfalfa and corn, soybeans, and wheat. Alfalfa is a perennial crop. You've got one chance to get phosphorus and potassium down deep in the soil to feed that alfalfa for the next 3-4 years or however long you're going to leave that stand in. Get it done now. We would just really encourage you, take a look at how many total tons during the lifetime of that stand do you expect to take off that field. Put that into the Ag PhD fertilizer removal app that you can download for your smartphone or your tablet. Just look at that. Punch in alfalfa, say, all right, I plan to pull out this many tons over the next 3 or 4 years, and then fertilize according to that. So if it was me, for example, and I needed, let's just say, 300 pounds of potash and 150 pounds of phosphorus, just as an example, and that's probably way low for you, but let's say I needed all that, I'd put it all out today. Maybe it's 500 pounds, maybe it's 700 pounds. It might be some ridiculous number and you're gonna go, what? That makes no sense, Brian. Why would I do that all in one shot? Here's why. Because phosphorus and potassium don't move well in soil. Same thing with zinc, same thing with copper. So if you lay it on the soil surface after you've planted at some point over the next 2, 3, 4 years, it's not going anywhere. Your crop's not going to get the chance to use it. Put it down in the ground. You'll be much more efficient using that fertilizer.
And there are a lot of farmers that will utilize a strategy of, well, in between cuttings, I'll put a low rate of fertilizer out there each time. And I get it, that can help supplement things along the way. But as Brian mentioned, with that soil movement component, especially with phosphorus, you just aren't going to get the full benefit of that phosphorus you apply in between cuttings. You may get it a couple of cuttings later, provided that you have a lot of rainfall. There's a good way to try this out on your farm. Split your field. If you think, oh, I don't know, I think Brian's a little bit crazy, which let's face it, sometimes he can be. And this is one of those things where you are going to invest quite a bit of money up front, but try it on part of your farm. What we've seen over many years is our results are so much better, and our expression in that crop for several years down the road in terms of more tonnage with each cutting, it's there when you get that fertility out up front.
You know how every once in a while you'll hear something and you go, well, there's hope that that will work. There's a chance that will work. It felt to me like that's what Darren was saying, that if you put the P and the K out there between cuttings, there's a chance that eventually it'll work. Yeah, it'll eventually work when you raise your next crop 5 years later. It's not going to work in between. Unless you have very sandy soil, it's never going to work. So in our heavy ground with not a lot of rainfall, we're froze half the year, there's no possible chance that throwing P and K out in between cuttings is worth the money. Either do it up front or just save your money and let the crop mine out as much as it can. Now, with things like sulfur, boron, even if you want to throw a little nitrogen out there, those things are leachable, and absolutely in between cuttings you can do some of that kind of stuff. You can also do some foliar feeding. If you want to do just very, very, very light rates foliar on the alfalfa plant, I get that. All those things are fine. But what I'm talking about is big rates of P and K. Put those out right now before you ever seed that alfalfa. Get them down in the ground where the alfalfa can use them. You will absolutely be money ahead. You'll get more tons. You'll get better removal of that fertility over the lifespan of that alfalfa. You will be happy.
The other thing you'll be happy that you invest in up front, besides good quality seed, of course, is getting that weed control taken care of. Now, when we look at pre-emerge herbicides for alfalfa, you don't have a whole lot of choices, but you do have a really good choice. Our product of choice is Eptam. It's one that does have a high volatility, meaning you need to incorporate it right away. So with Eptam to work perfectly, you'd ideally like to double incorporate that. So applying it with a tillage tool and then making another tillage pass crossways through the field to make sure that it's deep in that soil and protected. Now, when I say deep in the soil, I mean 1 inch to 2 inches deep. If you get that Eptam spread out, you're going to have good control on grasses. You're also going to have good control on small seeded broadleaves, which allows your alfalfa to have no competition as it's coming up. So you're going to have a nice thick stand that you're going to benefit from for years to come.
So there are a lot of other herbicides that can be used in alfalfa. This is the one you need to use pre-emerge. Believe me, this is by far the best thing. Typically, we're talking about 2 quarts per acre. It has to be instantly incorporated, like Darren said. And he said 1 to 2 inches. Even if you get it a little too deep, understand that Eptam becomes a gas in the soil. It's going to work its way up. So I don't have a big issue if you get it down 3, 4, even 5 inches deep. It still can work. Sure, ideally, I'd like it placed right at 2 inches. You'll get the very best performance.
Okay, the other thing is perennial weeds. If you've got some perennial weeds out there, like thistles, for example, or let's say you have some dandelions out in this field, it may not be the best field for you to put alfalfa in. Let's just start with that. Now, you do have the option of Roundup Ready alfalfa and killing perennial weeds and killing dandelions. That's probably the biggest benefit that I see with Roundup Ready alfalfa. Many of the other annual weeds we can get under control with different products, but with those perennials and deep-rooted weeds that we're going to see out in the field, Roundup is your best option. So start with a good burn down if you must plant in that field. Kill those weeds before you do any tillage out there, so the Roundup has time to get down through that root system and kill all the new shoots as well. And then if you're planting Roundup Ready alfalfa, you've got the option of doing Roundup in crop as well.
Here's your one chance over the next 3-4 years to kill those perennials. So go with a big time rate. I'm talking 2 to 3 quarts of Roundup, whatever the highest labeled rate is, and control the weeds before you ever do any tillage out there. Leave it untilled for a long time in advance. Go spray a big time rate, wait a few days or maybe even a week, then do your tillage, and then go ahead and seed the alfalfa.
Well, summer seeding is a great time to get alfalfa established. Giving you some tips here in terms of fertility and weed control that really can't be made up later in that crop's life. So get those things taken care of up front for the most successful crop you can have. One other factor you'll need to deal with up front is controlling our weed of the week. Can you identify this week's weed?
Stop losing money from your stored grain with the End Zone fan control system from Farm Shop MFG. Hot spots and moisture in your bin can cost you thousands in lost revenue. The End Zone monitors outside conditions to run your fans exactly when you want them to, naturally bringing your grain to ideal temperature and humidity. Master bin management with the End Zone. For more information, visit farmshopmfg.com.
If you're looking to expand your farm's grain handling, you want everything to be fast and efficient. The Quick Belt from Norwood Sales is your all-around grain handling solution. Our conveyor-based system uses an 18-inch belt and a 10-inch tube, which minimizes seed damage while moving more than 10,000 bushels an hour. That's fast enough to fill a semi in 6 minutes. Plus, our hood is designed to gently direct the flow of grain straight down, keeping your crop in condition. Keep your grain and your farm moving with the Quick Belt from Norwood Sales.
Where we have run the Soil Warrior, we have harvested the best corn we have ever harvested in the history of Renwood Farms. Now, I'm kind of always wanting to push the envelope to see what else I can do to help enhance that emergence. Their ride is so much smoother. Their seed placement is even better. Where we had our best emergence and we've had our best yields was where we ran the soil warrior.
Why do I farm? It's just something I've always wanted to do. Something I've known since I was my daughter's age. When you farm, you have a responsibility to keep it growing. To look at a freshly planted field, a newborn calf, even your bottom line, then ask yourself, how do I help this grow? How can I make it even more productive? I ask myself these questions every day because no matter what I'm doing, I'm still a farmer.
Find love, and then give it all away. Find love, then give it all away.
If you had unplanted acres this year, the important thing isn't to dwell on, hey, what could have been this year. Let's just focus on what can we do next year to make that crop ground fantastic.
First of all, if there's an unplanted field, there's only one reason why. It was too wet. It was too wet when you wanted to get out there. Well, there's one fix for that. It's called drainage tile. It's something that's been done for hundreds of years around the world. It's been proven safe and environmentally friendly. All those answers have been they've been out there and available for a long time. The question is, why haven't you done it so far? Why haven't you put tile in? Well, if you haven't done any drainage tile work on your farm, chances are you've had some prevent plant fields over the years. Look at those fields, inspect them in terms of, well, what could be done for drainage? Find the elevations out on those fields, and I know there are many fields that you say, I just don't know where I'm going to go. But it's surprising how many of these fields that have been unplanted have a good place to drain the water to. And if you can get that water moving in the right direction, your fields dry out so much quicker. Look around you. Look at other fields in the neighborhood that did get planted. In most cases, they've got some good drainage, good subsurface drainage going on in the fields. So you've got neighbors that you can lean on as well to say, okay, how did you get it done? What kind of spacing did you use, and those types of things? Because drainage tile is something that's made a huge difference on our farm. We've seen it the last couple of years with fields right next to ours that didn't get planted, where we've got drain tile in the ground. We were in there on time in most cases.
Not only that, but the crop is fantastic. And here's the big thing we want you to think about. It's not getting rid of the surface water. I'm not as worried about that. What I am worried about is the water table below. If the water table's too high, it literally kills your soil. The number one thing you've got to think about going from this year unplanted to next year planted is soil life, soil health. How do you improve that? Number one, all the microbes have to have oxygen. They have to have air in that soil. If they don't have air, they're dead. So that's the number one reason why you've got to do this. If you have the soil life going for you, you're well on your way. Now, a lot of people say, well, put cover crops out there. And yes, that certainly can help. You want something growing out there for the rest of this season, even if it's just to get anything growing, that's great. But having the drainage is a real big key.
Let's talk about cover crops for just a minute, because honestly in 2020 we had a lot of issues out in fields where growers had put cover crops out for the first time or maybe the second time they'd ever done it, and they tried something a little different. Maybe they got the cover crop in earlier in 2019 than they had before. Now they had much more growth than they were used to working with. Other farmers let that cover crop live all through the winter, and they had green cover crop they were going to plant in for the first time. Now, if you've been using a cover crop for many years, you already understand how to handle this, but if you're a newbie, don't take so many chances, and at least don't do it on a big amount of acres, because we saw a lot of challenges dealing with all that residue in the spring. So make sure if it's your first time using a cover crop, talk to others in your area who have been doing it for years, that are doing the same rotation and practice as you are, to see what tricks they have to make it work.
In the upper Midwest, we would tell you, put that cover crop in, that's fine, then terminate it this fall at some point. Terminate it either with herbicide or with tillage. Tillage is probably the biggest question we have coming out of unplanted acres. We're big believers in using tillage sporadically and in the right places. We did a lot of tillage on our farm this past year too after being really wet. Sometimes you just have to clean up those ruts and get the ground ready to go. So you'll just have to use a little bit of judgment in your area whether or not the tillage fits for you. But we would just tell you, make sure that cover crop is terminated this fall to have the best chance to plant early in the spring.
The other thing would be fertility. That's another big issue. We get a lot of questions about, and if you're going to do the tillage, hey, great opportunity to get that fertility out in front, till it into the ground, and be ready to go for next year. I just look at unplanted acres as, yep, it was very unfortunate that happened this year. Let's get set up to be successful for next year. And if you can get fertility work done on this ground when it's dry later on in the summer or early fall, that's fantastic, because now it's another job you don't have to do next spring.
And for me, I would wait absolutely until late in the fall. There's no way I'd do it in the summer because we're thinking about fertility for next year. And I would look at P and K, zinc, copper, the things that don't leach. Things like sulfur, boron, nitrogen, I get it if you want to wait till next spring because those could disappear if you have flooding once again.
If you had unplanted acres this year, it's a great opportunity to take care of those acres and set you up for success with your next crop. Another thing that'll set you up for success is keeping our weed of the week out of your field. We'll show you how to stop it coming up next.
The Weed of the Week is brought to you by Corteva Agriscience, Agriculture Division of Dow DuPont. Finish the fight against tough weeds with the Enlist Weed Control System.
Weeds are tough, but we're tougher. With unrivaled weed control, reduced drift, and near zero volatility. So, who's tough now?
Our Weed of the Week isn't annual, or at least it's usually an annual. Sometimes it's a short-lived perennial. It's cursed crowfoot.
It's in the buttercup family, and a lot of these buttercups can be toxic. This one probably got the name cursed because it's a little more toxic than some of the other buttercups. It's got a sap that's in it, so when you pull it and that plant breaks and that sap gets on your skin, it will cause blisters. It could be even worse, so be careful if you see this weed.
Well, you know, Darren, when we were kids on the farm and we had to pull weeds, that's maybe why our dad always told us, wear gloves, boys. You don't want any of that kind of stuff getting on your hands.
Well, that's a good idea, especially if you don't know what the weed is, because there are some weeds out there that are toxic, and even this weed, I was thinking, you know, there's probably somebody that thinks this is an edible plant. I don't know, maybe there are parts of it that are edible, but I don't want to take that chance.
No way. So you want to get good control of this. Usually we see it out in pastures. If you do, it's pretty easy to control with a good strong rate of 2,4-D. Don't get cheap on it. Use a good rate. Otherwise, a lot of the ALS herbicides will work. If you're, let's say in wheat, you could use one of those affinity products. That would be just fine. Osprey is okay. You could start with Sharpen. You turn to corn. That's where I'd probably suggest Verdict down, follow post-emerge with Status.
In soybeans, the 3 Pre's will certainly help you. It'll help hold it back a little bit. And then post-emerge, of course, you've got those specific products like the Enlist products, the XtendiMax, and those types of dicamba products and so forth.
Roundup and Liberty, they're all pretty good on this particular weed.
Well, that's all the time we have for our Weed of the Week, Cursed Crowfoot. But there's more Ag PhD to come right after this.
Success isn't just about maintaining your operation, how you make out for the season, or how much you can get from each acre. It's about doing precisely what needs to be done to feed your crop and grow your legacy, all the way down to the last drop. AgroLiquid Precision Crop Nutrition. Apply less, expect more. Find a retailer at agroliquid.com.
More choices, more money. With Bayer Plus Rewards, you choose from our broad portfolio of high-performance products. Earn more money on the eligible products that are right for your farm. And use our new portal to see your purchases, track your rewards, and decide how you want to use them. Visit mybayerplus.com to sign in and start earning. That's the advantage of more control in your hands. That's the plus.
How much money are you leaving in the bin? If you want the most profit from your stored grain, you need the Grain Temp Guard from Farm Shop MFG. This low-cost bin monitoring solution tracks temperature and humidity and gets your grain in ideal condition. And with deep preseason discounts on all Grain Temp Guard units, now is the best time to upgrade. Don't leave your money out in the bin. Get the most from your grain. Order today at farmshopmfg.com.
Each year brings new and unique challenges to farming, and your operation needs to constantly adapt to meet them. That's why at Ag Biome, we're working every day to bring you new and better solutions. Microbial-based solutions that protect your crop and help it reach its full potential. To learn more about how we're doing it, visit agbiome.com. Ag Biome, feeding the world responsibly, partnering with microbes for human benefit.
How much does your crop residue cost you? Over time, residue accumulates in your fields, building excess carbon levels and tying up your plant available nitrogen. Residue also traps P, K, and micros and can take years to naturally become available to your crops. This is because soil lacks the diverse microbial life needed to break it all down. With Decomp, you can naturally restore life to your soil and allow the release of valuable crop fertility. Learn more about Decomp at aggbio.solutions.
Iron Talk is brought to you by Case IH.
Why do I farm? It's just something I've always wanted to do. Something I've known since I was my daughter's age. When you farm, you have a responsibility to keep it growing. To look at a freshly planted field, a newborn calf, even your bottom line, then ask yourself, how do I help this grow? How can I make it even more productive? I ask myself these questions every day because no matter what I'm doing, I'm still a farmer.
Midwestern corn harvest is ahead of schedule this year. Most farmers would like to harvest dry corn, but not too dry, and this is the year you really have to watch out for that. We'll talk about how corn that's too dry can be a problem in today's Iron Talk. You're probably thinking, dry corn isn't the problem, it's a great deal. All right, you got me there. Yep, it saves you money when you don't have to dry the corn down. My argument, though, is that it may cost you money if you let the corn get too dry in the field. What I'm talking about here is shatter loss. With shatter loss during corn harvesting, there are a couple obvious points to make. First, harvesting at 20 to 24% moisture reduces harvest loss tremendously. In an ideal world, that's when we'd harvest everything to maximize yield and minimize problems. This year, with all the heat and sunlight much of the country received, this window may close very quickly, though. Secondly, when corn gets below 20% moisture, shatter becomes more of an issue. Every kernel that doesn't make it into your combine is a potential volunteer corn plant for your field next year. The weed competition costs you yield, and the weeds themselves, volunteer corn, cost you money to control. If you're continually running into problems with grain getting too dry in the field before harvest, or if you're actually targeting 14 to 17% moisture corn for harvest, there are different fixes available for nearly every kind of harvesting machine. The first step would be to speak to your equipment dealer for upgrades and modifications that you could make to your specific brand of harvesting equipment. Secondly, there are aftermarket fixes advertising up to an 80% reduction in shatter loss at the header. If you don't think you can afford to fix things, stop and consider the economic loss you're seeing in the field. Using the Ag PhD Harvest Loss Calculator, 2 kernels of corn per square foot equates to about 1 bushel of yield loss. If you're losing 3 bushels per acre on 1,000 acres, that's more than a $10,000 loss. And this doesn't even include the expense of a volunteer corn herbicide for your next crop. Shatter loss is a serious problem in corn, especially when corn gets too dry. Do some harvest loss counts on your farm this harvest season and look into the fixes to put this lost income back into your pocket. That's all the time for today's Iron Talk, but now, back to the show.
That's all the time we have for today's show, but if you're looking for more agronomic information, we'd encourage you to check out the Ag PhD radio show. We're on Sirius XM channel 147 at 2 p.m. Central each weekday.
And don't miss the next Ag PhD TV show. We'll have another Read of the Week, Farm Basics, Iron Talk, and a whole lot more. I'm Darren Hefty.
And I'm Brian Hefty. Thanks for watching Ag PhD.